Welcome to the Thriving Christian Artist, the podcast where we hope you connect with God to bust through the roadblocks that have held you back for years, create the work you love, and really live the life you know God created you to live as an artist in His kingdom. I'm Matt Thomas, your host. Let's get started. Well, hey there, and welcome to the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. I'm so excited that you're with me today. Listen, you're going to love today's interview. My friend Michael Dudash is not only an incredible painter and artist, but an incredible lover of Jesus as well. And man, Michael, I'm so excited that you're with me. It's been too long since we've had a chance to visit and talk about what God's doing.
Well, you're right about that, Matt. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm really glad you contacted me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We met several years back. We were trying to decide how many, but you came and taught at a couple of our gathering of artisans. And the thing that I think that really I loved about you is not only that you were this super talented artist, obviously anointed to do what you do, but also a worship leader and just a heart to see people connect authentically with Jesus. And it's such a rare commodity, it seems nowadays. And at the same time, God's in the business of raising up this army of artists that we're all a part of. And so I can't wait for everybody to hear your story and hear more about who you are.
Well, I'll do my best to not disappoint. I don't know.
That's right. I always tell people when I do interviews, I'm like, don't give me too good of an introduction because I don't want to have a big letdown.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, listen, you have just a wonderful, background as I was kind of just, looking at all the things on your website and remembering conversations that we've had. You've not only been the oil painter that you are, but started as an illustrator and have this musician streak in you. So talk a little bit about how you even got to where you are now, what that journey has been like to go from just a hobbyist and somebody that was playing around with your art to somebody that's really been taking this full time.
Well, it's hard to condense 66 years into a couple of minutes, but I'll do my best. I grew up in Minnesota. My mother went to art school briefly when she was young. My dad was a carpenter, but they've always fostered music and art in our family. So it's really been with me my whole life. I mean, I don't think it surprised anybody that I entered into the arts, and I'm a lifelong musician as well. The time I got out of high school, I did major in art for a year at a school in St. Paul, Minnesota. But I was playing music on the side.
Wow!
I wanted to go be a full-time musician, which I did for about 5 years, always keeping art as a hobby. And I decided by my mid-20s, I had enough of the musician's life on the road, and went back to art school for just a semester. And I was offered a job while I was still, like 2.5 years away from a degree, by McGraw-Hill Publishing Company. They had a branch in Minneapolis. And I didn't know much about illustrating. I just wanted to be a painter. And I quit school and worked with them for a year. And it fit me really well. I became kind of a victim of my own success. I started freelancing after that 1 year. I quit McGraw-Hill, and my wife, a new wife at that time, I'd met her when I was traveling in New England, and she's from Vermont. So we moved back to Vermont to raise the kids and have a family. And I got an agent in New York right away. So this is back in 1978. And 2 weeks later, I had a job for the Reader's Digest. So for 22 or 23 years, until about the year 2000, I was a full-time illustrator with agents in New York. And I did everything from movie posters, a couple hundred book covers, TV guide covers, Sports Illustrated magazines. I designed stamps for the government and the United Nations, and did corporate work. And you're a hired wrist, so you do whatever your agents sort of throw your way. Yeah, we raised the kids while we were living in the Green Mountains. I had a studio up there, and it was a great life. And I met the Lord in 1978 is when I got saved. So we were also involved in building a small church there in Vermont for many years that was part of a ministry that was based out of Pittsburgh. It was charismatic and evangelical and liturgical at the same time, believe it or not. And so I was able to use my music really in all the worship and doing that. So that was what I was doing in my personal life. And my professional life was full. And I'd been praying for years that in that process for the Lord to open some doors for me to do some faith-based work with Christian publishers. And I got a call one time from Ron DiCiani. I'm going to guess around 1990 maybe.
Okay.
And he invited me to become a part of what he was doing at Dayspring with limited edition prints for the Christian market. And that really set me on part of my professional life to be able to do a bunch of stuff for the Lord directly. And I did a lot of work for Tommy Nelson and Word and Multnomah, a lot of the Christian publishers up until the year 2000. And then I was getting burned out on the illustration business, and I wanted to do more of my own work. So always just to go back to easel work, gallery work. And so the computer had changed everything anyway in terms of traditional oil painting. So it was something I had to morph into a full-time fine artist, I guess.
Yeah.
It wasn't that many years later that you and I talked, really, but I gradually got to the point after experimenting a lot with different subject matters, changing my style a little bit. About 14 years ago now, or 15 years ago, I decided to do more frontier Western painting. I was always interested in history. There's a lot of faith-based artists and subject matter, fundamental stuff in the history of our nation and the settling of the West that appealed to me. And so that's what I've been doing ever since. I've been working with galleries out West, and it's gone very, very, very well over these last 15 years, particularly the last 5, 6, 7 years when I moved to Idaho. I moved to Idaho 7 years ago, northern Idaho. And so it's been a lifelong blessing for me to be an artist. I still play guitar and mandolin and a little bit of piano, and I do it to relax, but I also do it in a home church group we've had going here for several years. And it's been a busy life, submerged in the arts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely submerged in the artwork.
So many artists I know struggle, especially when they're taking their work into the marketplace. They can struggle with this idea of, I'm creating out of this place of inspiration from the Lord. I'm creating out of this love for him. Is it wrong? Is it bad to take that into the marketplace? I know that you and I both feel very passionately about being in the marketplace with our work. And how did you ever have a struggle with that? Or did you always see your artwork as a vehicle in which God had given you to really impact those that were around you in the marketplace?
Well, I think that's a difficult kind of question. I think everybody might have their own journey. For me, as a man growing up, getting married and wanting to have a family, I needed a way to support the family. So I've been self-employed for 40 years. I've been married 40 years, but it was, so the artwork was a way. I saw an avenue that doesn't really exist as much as it did back then with illustration, but it was a way for me to not only do what I loved, but it was a way to, if I worked hard, I could support the family. And there was still it was a viable career option to become a full-time illustrator. So I think, frankly, that was kind of first, but I also met the Lord really around the time I was starting my career. So as that grew in my personal life, as I mentioned earlier, there was a point when, how do I merge these two together a little bit more, where I'm able to take my talent and support the family and raise 3 kids, and to be able to also use artwork as a ministry, or get involved in that aspect of it, spreading the gospel and serving the Lord. Now, I'd been doing that in music, so that was sort of automatically there. I think that fulfilled that part of me for years, really, Matt. I was head of a worship team and learned to play piano, so I could do all the services 2, 3, 4 times a week in church. And it was really a little bit later, like I said, years later, that I began to think, well, how creatively can I use my personal inspiration as a painter, really, as a drawer. So the Lord opened that door, with working with Christian publishing. So that was great. And I think that all I can say to people is everybody has different priorities. It might be different, say, for somebody who doesn't need to make a living as a full-time artist. They can use it as a serious hobby, let's say, and use their inspiration from God and use their talents that came from the Lord to express themselves in a way that'll help them fulfill the calling of the gospel. So I don't think there is a general rule on how to go about doing that. I get this a lot. I used to teach quite a bit. I haven't been doing that in recent years, but we talk about this a lot. I did several workshops with Jeannie Randall at the Masterpiece Fine Arts Foundation over in Oregon, and that was the big question all the time: is, gee, I'm moved. I've got an inspiration. Well, what do I do with it? How do I translate it? Some people, I guess, I occasionally would run into a purist who would say, well, you shouldn't do it for money. Keep it pure. It's just for the gospel.
Right.
All of that kind of stuff. And I would say, well, if you have the luxury of being able to do that, good for you.
Exactly. Otherwise, you're down at the Starbucks trying to make a living.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're flipping burgers or digging ditches, and
that's right.
On the weekends trying to paint for Jesus. But it never really. It's rare that you can find somebody who can do artwork or be in the arts totally for the gospel. I think that's a pretty rare commodity. It's maybe a little bit easier in music. It's really difficult when it comes to doing it as a visual artist. There's probably only a handful of people really over the years who've been able to do that at a serious level, make a serious living just painting as strictly for the gospel. So everybody has to find that balance. I'm painting cowboys and Indians and historical frontier paintings, and I use a lot of themes that are biblically based.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I'm painting old time mountain men and pioneers and cowboys and Indians, and making a good living at it. It's a very viable way for me to still support my family as an artist, and yet I can still always infiltrate godly principles and faith-based principles into what I'm doing.
Let's talk a little bit about that with your creative process, because I know some artists really feel this kind of intuitive process, like they're painting with the Holy Spirit, like he's speaking to them and moving and all that. Then others, I'm not in that realm, by the way. I'm kind of more of, I receive inspiration when I'm in the woods as I'm sketching and drawing and writing and things like that. Then when I come into the studio, I'm creating from that place of inspiration, to glorify the Lord. But it's not like I feel like I'm having this, intense spiritual experience as I'm creating. What is your process like from inspiration to execution of your work, and how does God fit into that with you?
Well,
another simple question, Mark.
Yeah. Oh, can I just say yes or no?
That's right, exactly.
Well, I'm a person that out of necessity, I suppose, but it's always worked for me is to have a real sense of purpose for whenever I attempt to do anything. And I was able to begin to articulate that within myself, halfway through my career. When you're an illustrator, it's pretty obvious. Okay, I'm going to move past this very quickly. But hey, you had an art director, you had a job, everything was fed to you. You solved people's problems, and you created a piece of artwork. You tried to do something, that was interesting or beautiful or whatever, and there wasn't a whole lot of, I would say, inspiration or direction of the Holy Spirit in that kind of work.
Yeah.
It was mostly in my personal life that gave me the stability as a Christian to be able to be successful at that. But now that I'm doing more of my own thing and have been for really the last 18 years, it is a different issue. I wake up every day and say, what's my inspiration? What's my purpose today? And so I think the fact that I've been a believer for so many years and committed in my walk, a lot of it just sort of automatically sort of comes in a way. It's just a part of who I am and who you are. I'm not the kind of person at this point that I'm praying all the time about over my paintings and all my decisions. It's just part of the flow of who I sort of am. I'm very aware of that when I have, say, bigger decisions like a large work I have to do, or make business decisions about being involved in a show, or working with clients, or doing a commission, let's say. Those are the kind of moments I say, all right, Lord, let's get serious here. How are you going to direct me in this? Or I really do need some inspiration or some guidance to clarify the purpose for why I'm doing something. And I think that I have a process that I've just created over many, many, many years of how I go about when I get an idea, how I go about actually implementing that process into a final piece of work. And it's fairly boring, I suppose. It's I don't follow it automatically every time, but inherent in that are biblical principles, and it's just it really carries over into how I conduct myself. As a professional, as somebody who works their butt off,
Right.
who's disciplined. And I think my walk with the Lord really influences me as in those areas, almost in a funny sense, more than I would say the inspirational part, like what colors do I use, or how loose am I in with a painting, or how tight I am. I think those abstract kinds of concepts that I incorporate into my work, I think they just naturally sort of flow out of me, and always have as an artist. It's something I give God all the glory for that. It's like I feel gifted in that area. It was a natural thing that He just gave to me as a creative person.
Yeah.
So I don't have to work at that all that hard. That part, does that make sense to you,
Yeah,
Matt?
absolutely. Absolutely.
But it's easy for me to quantify the fact that, okay, I have my life in order, I have a prayer life, knowledge of the Word, all those things that influence me as a businessman, as a husband, as a father, as a honest person, making ethical business decisions, being disciplined with my work ethic. All of those things to me are easy to quantify because of my walk and the biblical principles I've been taught over the years.
Well, hey, there's Matt. And one of the things that I found over the years in working with artists is that real lasting change in our life happens best in the context of supportive Christian community. And that's why I wanted to take this opportunity just to take a second and invite you to be a part of my online community called the Thriving Christian Artists Facebook group. Listen, this group is absolutely free, and over the years has actually grown to thousands and thousands of artists in just about every creative medium from countries all over the world. The cool thing is that it's become a real place of encouragement and life for artists, just like you and me, who want to share their work, share their life, connect with other artists, and really pursue everything God has for us as artists in His kingdom. Now, listen, to join, all you have to do is just click the link in the show notes here and answer a couple of questions just to let us know that you're a real person, and bam, you're in, okay? So, listen, I can't wait to connect with you inside of my Thriving Christian Artists Facebook group. Do it now, and we'll see you there very soon. All right, bye. I always really believe that God cares much more that we create as artists than what we create. It's about us really fulfilling that divine design that He implanted in us on our life, rather than creating quote unquote Christian art or whatever.
Yeah. Well, how many paintings can you do of Jesus sitting in the little kid on his knee?
Absolutely.
And to illustrate the spiritual things, I think actually music is an easier way to I think, because of its multimedia aspect, it's easier to I think create things definitely by the Spirit and for the Spirit, and to communicate spiritual biblical type themes musically. I find much easier than it is with a flat piece of two-dimensional art. We're pretty limited with our imagery. And when it comes to the spiritual things, like, how do you illustrate the Holy Spirit? Well, of course, there's the dove, there's an explosion of light, there's misty smoke, I don't know, whatever, a dreamy look at somebody's eye. And I find that kind of frustrating, and a lot of other Christian painters who've done that kind of work over the years feel the same way. We have those discussions. So I have to rely maybe on more subliminal, subconscious things in my work that are going to be a good witness, or maybe a testimony to the fact that God's in my life, or that there's a godliness in what I'm creating by choosing the subject or the concept. Maybe it's marriage, or maybe it's faith, or it's family, or it's integrity, or it's helping a brother. Those kinds of universal themes that spawn from a walk with the Lord, that can lead you into a conversation with somebody, as opposed to it being an overtly Christian subject or historically Christian subject. And it can be the title. Sometimes I'll title a painting. I did a painting of some Native Americans going up a very difficult mountain trail, and the two guys in the foreground, a Native American is leaning over, his hand is clasped with another Indian, he's helping him up the mountainside. And I called the painting a hard trail, a brother's hand.
Mm.
So it's a really painting about a universal of a brother helping another brother. It just so happens the market I'm in, there's a lot of Native American historical collectors of that kind of subject matter.
Yeah.
But it really is a biblical or universal theme that really I relate to through my walk. Does that make
Yeah.
sense to you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many things I want to talk about with you. One of the things I just switched questions in my head, but
Okay.
um, one of the things that I talk a lot about with artists in bringing their art to the marketplace is recognizing the connection of what you make and how people respond to it. And the fact that I think if you're going to really thrive as an artist spiritually, emotionally, creatively, financially, all of that, you can't just make things that you think will sell just for that sake. And at the same time, you can't create things that won't sell and expect to make a living from it.
Yeah.
So there is this beautiful kind of relationship that has to happen with us as artists in the marketplace where I make what I'm passionate about, and at the same time, I'm recognizing what the market is responding to that I love making in order to, start to develop that relationship. I guess I'd love to hear your perspective on that, because you said, like, for example, I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. So there are tons of luxury mountain homes here. The aesthetic that's developed in my work over the years really caters to that market. Now, it's what I love to do, but it really has been informed by that market. I guess I'd love to hear your perspective on how your work has evolved and how the marketplace that you're in has played a part in that.
Well, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a balance. It's a almost moment by moment, decision by decision, to look once again for the purpose. Why am I creating this thing? What's the purpose of it? And all those things that you just talked about come into influencing when I wake up and put energy into creating something, walking that line, I guess, or finding that balance. And I go through this exactly the same thing. I mean, because I have to make a living, because I've got bills to pay, or I've got to run a business here with a lot of expenses. I do create to a certain point things for the marketplace, but within that, there certainly is an aspect if I don't do it in a high level, very professional, very creative manner, it's not going to be successful.
Right.
So it's that. It's really that head in the heavens, feet on the earth kind of thing, that we always walk through as Christians. I mean, we're, it's left brain, right brain at the same time kind of stuff. There are a lot of analogies we can talk about that people can relate to bring this balance into their life between the spirit and the natural. I think that's what we're kind of talking about here is and I think it's very doable. I think it's very doable. I mean, I know that people who buy my artwork know that I'm a believer. That's part of, I know that what influences their emotional attraction or response to the work I do, because I'm not shy about that. And, but I don't beat them over the head with it with my artwork or anything else in my life. It's part of my greater testimony and witness. And I think that, first of all, for a person, if that's established in your life, I think as you enter into the marketplace and you try to do whatever you do at the highest level you possibly can, God's gonna make that happen. It's gonna work. I think it's the wrong thing to do is say I'm going to do a bunch of overtly Christian imagery or whatever I'm going to create, and just automatically think because I'm doing that, God's going to make it all successful.
Right.
It's just going to happen. I mean,
I call that the God card, right? I'm playing the God card, and you have to like this because God inspired it. I'm like, but it's horrible. I mean,
yeah. Oh God, I've seen some of the worst artwork I've ever seen is quote Christian art. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I don't. That's and whatever that means. But I've also the most inspiring, best stuff I've ever seen in my entire life is also Christian art. So, I think when I was down there, we talked a lot about that. Whenever I would teach in that kind of environment, I would say, "Look, you don't get a free pass here,
right?
Just because you're doing something quote for God
Right.
or as a Christian. And I think that so you need to be very aware of both sides of that. Work very, very hard at both sides of that, making sure you as a human being, as a witness, is first. That no matter what you're doing, you're living as a good testimony to the gospel and the Lord in your life. And I think the rest will sort of begin to take care of itself a little bit. When I still occasionally have a chance to do something overtly faith-based, and I put my best effort into that. But you know what? I put my best effort into everything that I do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's amazing how many believers and Christians I've met in the Western art marketplace that I've had a chance to visit with or share my testimony. They share theirs with me. And it all sort of flows together. It all, I don't know if that answered your question once again, but those are some thoughts,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I
regard.
think it is that it's just that mix of everything that's flowing in all of us, So,
Yeah.
I know that you are very protective of your studio time and you're very serious about your studio practices. As you look back, especially in these, this last season, as you're really focused on being a studio artist, are there habits or a set of practices that you have employed that have really become foundational for you that you would say, yeah, these things are really key for me in my life as I've developed into the professional artist that I am today?
I think a couple of things. I want to throw my wife in here on the mix for starters, because it helps to have a spouse that understands the mindset of somebody committed to their art. Valerie and I've been married 40 years, and she's a creative person herself and does her own variation of artwork and crafts. So that helps immensely, because she'll put up with me when I've got a binge at the easel, and so I think that overlaps into what do I do with my work habits. I think a lot of people are also amazed that I probably spend half my time at the desk, with the computer and just managing the business, paying bills, ordering supplies. I'm a photographer as well. I think that I absolutely go project to project, really having a schedule out where I divide up my time. And I've got to, obviously, the most critical time for me is in front of the easel, doing the actual creative work. But it's a long, complicated process. And I think that all I can tell you, Matt, for what works for me, and I'm sure it works for everybody else, is you've got to have your life organized and in order. To make this on a consistent level happen. I have a process, with the creative process. If I want to do, let's put it this way, if I want to do consistently high-end artwork that's going to, over a long period of time, establish me with a successful career, I have to have a process that is organized and stable and professional, and I think that's all godliness.
Yeah,
I really do. And I think that, managing your time, getting your life in order, he is a God of order. He's not a God of chaos. And I've learned in my Christian walk that you have a foundational, orderly life in your spiritual walk. That's when the power of the Spirit and the freedom of the creative movement can work in that envierment. It's like that. It's like that with church services. You don't go in and everything's just chaos from the beginning to the end. And the more certain amount of order there is in the way people gather and conduct themselves, now allows the Holy Spirit to really freely move. And I think it's exactly the same process in a studio like I work. Everything's in its place. It's relatively clean most of the time. I know where all my supplies are, and the office is orderly, so that when I actually get in front of the easel, I know where everything is. I don't have to worry about that. It's all in, just freely. It really actually enjoy myself. That's where the real fun is, when you're actually right in the moment of all that creation. The rest feels a little bit more like work, but you know what I mean? All the other stuff. But when you, because everything is in order, and I put a lot of effort into that, now when it's time to play, kind of, and really express yourself, let the paint fly, or I paint actually very quickly lots of times, even though my work is pretty detailed. But I can release myself and just really have fun. It's sort of like if you're a musician, you
Yeah.
got all the mics in the place, all the chords are working, your guitar's in tune,
Now let's
everything's,
go.
okay, already hit record, and now you shut your eyes and you release yourself,
Yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
I wish I could say I was as orderly as you. I work in a rat's nest, but I have a very good studio assistant, and so I come in and every day everything's clean, and I'm like, this is magic. It's wonderful.
Yeah, good for you.
Well, you got to work to your strengths, right? And so
Yeah, I hear you.
do what works for you. Well, Michael, you are such an inspiration to many, and I mean, so many to me, definitely, and such a father. I think such a beautiful example of what God can do in all of our lives as artists who are fully committed to Him and want to flow with Him and everything He's doing. I know that folks will want to get in touch with you. Your website, cmdudash.com, also on Facebook. Anything else I'm missing? Other ways to get in touch with you? And
no, that's pretty much it. People always say, "Oh, you need to do, all this other stuff online," and I just don't really have the time for it.
Too busy selling art. That's good.
Well, I guess so. Yeah, I still travel quite a bit. I go to shows. I'm working at with museums and auctions and 4 or 5 galleries, and I'm gone 6, 8, 9 times a year. I do photo shoots in Montana with reenactors and horses and wagons and Native Americans, and it's really an interesting, wonderful life. I still do a bit of licensing with. It's not unusual for a church or a ministry to call me and want to license a piece of my faith-based work. So anyway, all that combines for an incredibly busy life. I'm still 60 hours a week, probably in the studio, so that hasn't changed, but I'd love to hear from people. Welcome to get in touch. And usually an email or contact me on Facebook, Messenger is really the best way. If it's an email, it's documented, and I'll eventually get back to you.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and being a part of the podcast today.
Well, you're welcome, Matt. It's been a pleasure. I have no idea what I said. I hope it all makes sense.
Hey, thanks so much for spending a few minutes with me today on the podcast. Listen, I hope it's been a huge encouragement to you on your journey as an artist. Hey, also, before you leave, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the other episodes of the Thriving Christian Artist podcast. And also, be sure to connect with me on Facebook, Instagram, or at my website, which is matttommymentoring.com. Until next time, remember, you were created to thrive. Bye-bye.